There's a quote by Hun-Butz-Man, the seven immortal gods of the earth, the sacred seven.
Yeah. He talked about, and he was one of the writers of the Mayan mysteries, and he passed away probably about 10, 15 years ago. He wrote that the sacred seven were reminders of the galactic origins of Mayan culture. They're also the seven isosceles triangles we see each year in Chichen Itza, Yucatan. They're the masters teach us in a living way, and you and I can experience the sacred moment when Kukulkan Quetzalcoatl arrives to imbue us with the cosmic energy. And so you see how this all resonates. At that moment, we feel the vibration of Hunab Ku as the only giver of life. When he's talking about that, Hunab Ku, he's really speaking of spiritual ether. It's mentioned in other texts too, some of which I mentioned here, the ancient mysteries in the Roman mysteries of Mithras. Say all these things with fire and spirit until completing the first utterance. Then similarly, begin the second until you complete the seven immortal gods of the world. When you have said these things, you will hear thundering and shaking in the surrounding realm. And that's from the Mithras liturgies. This is the secret doctrine of the Rosicrucians, saying many object to the doctrine of rebirth on the ground that the experiences of each life not being remembered must be useless and without value. This is an erroneous view of the subject, for while such experiences may not be fully remembered, yet they are not lost to us at all, but really form a part of the material of which our minds are composed. They exist in essence in the form of feelings, characteristics, attractions, repulsions, etc. And you see here, he's actually referring to karmic memory, although he calls it essence, which is referring to essence where the astral fragments are created, which makes sense too, because the astral fragments are imbued with that karmic memory.
Spinoza.
Good old Spinoza.
Spinoza, land of the Union.
Yes. So when I was visiting ancient Lemuria in a past life with Red Jacket yet again, and this time it was just Red Jacket. I was not married to this third part of the soul configuration, but we were going through the destruction of Lemuria. There was a moment where I was sitting on an outdoor amphitheater and a soul came to me and called me Spinoza. And I said, "What does that mean?" And he said, "It means your writing lives." And of course, I tried to find out what that would mean later, of course. And so Baruch Spinoza was a Jewish philosopher who still, he's not like a great well-known philosopher, but his writings still remain in print. And he had some interesting philosophies, much of which I would no longer agree with today. But I think I was shown this about Spinoza to show me the continuity of the spiritual, even the spiritual purpose. Because here I was shown things about a few things over time. One was Spinoza. One was, you'll see the continuing reference to Odyssey is the name of my higher self, Homer, and these different things relating to Homer, and these things about being a writer and possibly having written things in the past.
Hermes.
And then Hermes, which was usually shown to me or uttered to me to remind me of the great responsibility of my spiritual calling, because I'll never forget being called out as Hermes in the court of Herbetheus when I had made a big error. And so what these mentions seem to have been was to show the continuity of this spiritual progression as well that somehow permeated my past lives. And, going back to just something I'd like to point out to people, even when something might be revealed to you that has to do with possibly having a lifetime that could have notability or some type of fame from a past life of some kind or historical significance. We should never assume that it means we absolutely were that person. It can often be that we are being given that information because there is something about that person or that person's calling in life or about that person's karmic situation in life that is similar to our own, that if we go back and learn from it, that it will be helpful to us. Sometimes as well, it might be that that particular historical person has a story that is close to a past life of ours. So like, let's say, for instance, I'll give you a common one. A lot of people think they were King Arthur, right? You hear that a lot. And now, does that mean that these people do not legitimately receive messages that they might have been King Arthur? Not necessarily. What it could mean is at the time of King Arthur, there were literally thousands of fiefdoms, and there would be little villages around the time of King Arthur where there might be 50 or 100 people, and there would be a king that overrode and oversaw that little village of 50 or 100 people. And there were literally thousands of these all over the English countryside and the European countryside. And so people could receive a message about King Arthur to have them look in the direction of King Arthur as a historical marker to get them in the right direction. But what might actually be true for them is that they may have been in that time frame, they may have been a king in one of these fiefdoms, because there were a lot of those, right? And there might be something in the King Arthur story that might be helpful for them to learn from it in their own karmic journey. Because there's a lot of universality in mythology. And so the mythology of King Arthur, the mythologies of the world, has a lot of universality into all of our karma and our karmic journeys that we can learn from and gather and glean. And so when you are led or guided, like I'll give you some more examples. Like I hear from people, not very infrequently, to be honest with you, who believe they are a Greek goddess or something like that, a Roman goddess or whatever. But the reality is, if you have been given the name of a Greek goddess or a Greek god or a Roman goddess or god, then the helpfulness of that would be coming out of studying that Greek goddess or god and trying to find what is in that story that may relate to you and your own karmic journey. It's not about it's so easy for people to jump on the ego bandwagon. It's not about that. It's about what about this particular mythological character relates to your own karmic journey.
Yeah, there's this book that I read on screenwriting. It was a compilation of many mythologies. So it's like the Path of the Fool, right, in tarot, and the fool that goes on this journey. But there's a lot of mythologies like that. And so in this circle that he had, one of the myths that we do is the path of the hero on an individual basis. And then another one is on behalf of the township. And then another one is like a universal one, like maybe like Buddha or Jesus. So there's all these different mythological paths that one can choose to take. That's kind of, it's a construct that's out there that we can tap into.
Yes.
So from the Dhammapada, there is no fire like passion, no stranglehold like hatred, no snare like delusion, and there is no torrent like craving. Sometimes a soul must delve into their own delusions in order to be purified of them. Purification requires change within one's thoughts as well as actions, but the complete purification of vice accumulates in the soul. no longer having the desire to indulge in them. I've kind of had an experience like the last, I don't know, a couple of weeks where an energetic thrust of like one of my vices just seemed to kind of dissipate. And I felt like maybe there's the magical lace
Yes.
that we're going to speak of that helps to withdraw the karmic thrust of our vice just enough, pull it back, withdraw it just enough so we have enough strength to kind of like step up and take over, because maybe we're just like a little too overburdened.
Yep.
But the magical lace, as it's called, like kind of just gave us enough to like get out of it. And I kind of felt like something like that's kind of happened to me in the last couple of weeks.
Well, that's cool. So do you want to share more about it, or?
Like lust is a very common thing that we all have, and so I've kind of had a breakthrough just with that. Not like I'm acting out on it, but just maybe objectifying and stuff more is what I've done. And so I just feel like I don't have the desire to do that as much as I did. Man, like there's certain like ways that you know, maybe we're taught to be in our society or whatnot, but I feel like my journey with that has been that it always make me feel guilty and ashamed. So we all have this, for the propagation of species, we all have this continual energetic, I feel, bubbling up like a volcano. I feel that recently something shifted where I just don't look at it the same way, so.
That's good. That's how it actually manifests, where you just take these tiny little things. Sometimes you don't even notice them. They're so small. These little shifts occur. Sometimes it's even from these energetic things that might be even happening in your sleep or through your meditations. And then all of a sudden, something just changes. It just changes. And you're like, how did that happen?
Well, I was praying, like I was asking to like have it taken away because I just didn't want to do it. I have that experience because really what it was is that it wasn't even necessarily, wasn't a physical act as much. It was just like a pattern of shame and guilt. Oh,
Yes.
right now I'm acting like this behavior. Oh man, I feel like crap. I'm just like, God, I don't want to feel that way or do that anymore. So.
Well, and what's interesting about this, because you mentioned lust, and that is, pretty much the universal vice that almost everybody shares, both men and women. That's what both men and women admit in private, and
Yeah.
what we're trying to do with lust, it's not that we are trying to alter the fact of there is a beauty between the man and the woman. We are trying to alter the negative thrust of lust, which is a negative expression of sexuality. We're trying to alter that to something more beautiful, which is a positive outcropping of the unconditional love of God, which is an honoring of the opposite sex, which honors one another and the beauty of the male body and the female body, and does not try to degrade either one. And it honors the union of the man and woman and the family and all these things that come from that in a different way. What happens is that transformation which occurs changes to a different thrust, where we realize this is not about sexuality or about the female or the male being bad, or the fact that both men and women have sexual feelings is like something that's just bad. It's about altering the negative, destructive sexuality, which is the kind of sexuality which gives no regard to the well-being of the others, and the kind of sexuality which does objectify, as you said, it objectifies a female or a male into something that is just there for someone's visual pleasure or physical pleasure, rather than seeing them as a beautiful creation of God and a soul with all the same aspirations and needs and requirements that each one of us has, and recognizing that we cannot denigrate any soul to that level. And so it is this shifting that takes place. The way you described is exactly how it happens. And that's beautifully done, because that'll be helpful to people to realize it's not always like this grand awakening. Sometimes it's a simple shift, and then another simple shift, you know what I mean? And another simple shift. And that's how the soul slowly starts walking into the new man, a new reality, a new way of seeing things. And it doesn't mean you become neutral sexually. It means that you start having a different way of approaching your own sexuality that is not destructive to the opposite sex, right?
Or to myself, really.
Or to yourself, very much so.
It was just all going on inside of my mind, you know, and my feelings. It's like, I suck. I suck. But, you know, later on we talk about God chooses us sometimes because of our sin.
Mm-hmm.
And so lust, I know that's a common one, but it's one that I can accept that has been a huge one in my life, probably lots and lots and lots of lifetimes. For whatever reason, I think in preparing for this talk that we're doing in prayer at this moment, I feel there's a shift, and it's shifted the way I feel about myself, but also when I'm walking down the street and there can be the same beautiful woman I've seen every day, and I'm, instead of like walking by going, wow, in my head, like, ooh, she's cute. Instead of just like, hi, how you doing? It's a nice day, huh? It's like, yeah, it is a nice day. It's like, oh, that person can talk. You know? So, yeah. So anyway, so thank you for that. Hopefully that can be helpful to some people. So when you wish to contract something, you must momentarily expand it. When you wish to weaken something, you must momentarily strengthen it. When you wish to reject something, you must momentarily join with it. When you wish to see something, you must momentarily give it up. This is called subtle insight. The good old Lao Tzu.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Now, could you talk about the path to Angel's Twilight?
Well, the path to Angel's Twilight is when you're starting to realize that every person in your life is a little bit of an angel in the twilight. And the twilight is always a term that I used for, it's for...
Twilight is karma.
Yes, it is karma. We go into this space where there's like a shift in our consciousness, where we realize that when people are communicating with us, that we become like, I don't know, ultra tuned in. We shift into a different vibration where we are receptive to the underlying meanings and messages that are being transmitted to us through them. They become an emissary of heaven, and that's how they become an angel in the twilight, you know, because they, whether they know it or not, most of the time they don't, they have all of a sudden become this sieve through which God's wisdom is flowing to us, whether it's through literally direct spiritual wisdom, or even just the misunderstandings they may communicate, which all of a sudden has greater meaning to us, because now the meaning is becoming alive. We're getting it. Things are starting to open up for us. We're like, oh, now I understand what's going on there. I understand what's happening there. We realize that the people all around us are part of this grand play, and everything becomes enlivened in a different way. It's not the same anymore. We're not just, wandering around in the dark, asleep. We come awake. And that means that everything that comes into our sphere of knowledge and influence is all of a sudden different. And we look at everything as a potential message from God, but not because everything that everybody says is wisdom from God, because a lot of what people say might be a complete deception. And that's part of the message from God, which is that all of a sudden you recognize it. And you're like, okay, I never noticed that before, but that's an untruth. I cannot follow that way. So it's both. It's both. All of a sudden, everybody becomes this mirror to you. And then the things that you have misperceived are suddenly being mirrored back to you. And everything that you have misunderstood is just in your face all of a sudden,
We realize that we're everybody else, and everybody else is us.
Exactly. There is no separation.
So you were, no way, you're having trouble letting go of Red Jacket? So so help had come to you because of that. And then you thought, but why? Because what would change? You've been doing this for hundreds of lives.
Yeah.
So what, why now? Like, why would it all of a sudden change? And then many thought forms began to appear to you of horrid and violent scenes. You were taken into the energy of Red Jacket's fragments on the ground. There was a samurai swordsman chasing you. It was stuff around the bad, violent parts of your father. And then he said to you, the violence and drunkenness of your father. And then he said to you, I'm the warrior energy which you do not understand and you fear. And you knew he was right. He was all of these things. And he appeared in the spiral. Hopefully it's the spiral, because my handwriting sucks sometimes. And then it was told to you, your job is not to be understood, but to be understanding. Nothing anyone does is rejection of you, but of their self. In order to resolve this karma, you must be able to know from within that Red Jacket loves you underneath all of his illusions, all the violence, all the fear, all the warriorness, and you cannot wait to hear, but must know it is true, that he loves you. And then you say, and he has the energy of this Bowie knife, and you say, I love him, how can I let him go? And you are told, he will always be right here. Red Horse still operates from the same frequency of his lifetime as Red Jacket, because Red Jacket, Red Horse, they're the same soul. He followed the path of the warrior, and you follow the path of peace. The irony is that both paths eventually lead to love. Don't be afraid of the warrior within him. Seek to understand it. You then saw him on the ground a few days later, with the same violent nature. You can love someone's soul, but be incompatible with their personality. Red Jacket, you have been thrown the rope in the water. Now you must either drown or grab hold of it. Having shown him another direction, he can take it. It's entirely up to him as to whether he would seek it. And you realize that love was larger than you, something you didn't fully understand. And then you go on with a quote about the vast difference that occurs between karmic and eternal relationships. Red Horse, Red Jacket, was definitely a karmic relationship. A vast difference exists between karmic and eternal relationships, as souls come together to teach each other about the true and false natures of love. By recognizing what is true, we begin to recognize what is false, and vice versa. Karmic relationships are usually shorter duration. Eternal relationships, more lasting quality. The nature of karma is to force things into what you think it should be, while the nature of the eternal is to allow things to unfold into what they are becoming. Karmic relationships tend to be chaotic, with many highs and lows, whereas eternal relationships have reached fruition and become peaceful and serene, more along the middle ground. Karma is selfish and seeks for its own gratification, while that which is eternal is selfless and seeks for God's gratification. Karmic relationships diminish those involved in them, whereas eternal relationships are ordained by God. They energize the potentials within them, making the two greater together than they are apart. Karma is chaos, where that which is eternal is peace. So in the triangle that you had, obviously Red Jacket is karmic.
Yeah.
And so was the husband more of an eternal, or would you say?
let's see, in the red jacket, you're talking about the red jacket lifetime.
Well, Red Jacket in general, wasn't it more of a through line of karmic relationship, maybe? Because it seems like there was always unrequited love, or there was passion, or there was danger, or maybe it wasn't always that way, but just was there more of that than not that? I mean,
There was a lot of that, but it wasn't quite that simple. But in relation to this triangle, it was karmic. But there were other lifetimes where it was different. And a lot of that too would be revealed many, many years later as to lifetimes that were completely separate from that triangle, which were much more of a peaceful nature. To give it, to just kind of try to classify it as one or the other is really hard to do. But for the general, for this particular triangle, this was definitely a karmic relationship.
okay. Aren't all relationships somewhat karmic? Or
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
I think my wife and I definitely have more of an eternal relationship, I would say. Just because it is more like chill and serene and more a little more selfless, and a little when we're better together for each other than we are apart,
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel. So Alpha Centauri in the Book of the Angels. So you meet someone that's helping you write about the mirroring stages of karma. I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit.
Well, and that's partly what we were talking about with the angel's twilight, as well as the mirroring, where all of a sudden things are being shown to you as by mirror. And so everybody that comes into your life becomes a mirror of that, of everything, of everything. You know, what happens in these relationships, and it can happen with any relationship at any given time, where it can just suddenly, like a switch goes off, and all of a sudden the mirroring begins. Things that you didn't see, you all of a sudden start seeing. And you start seeing it in different things that are mirrored to you, whether it's the people around you, circumstances around you, different things that are now all of a sudden being mirrored back to you that you didn't connect before, that all of a sudden now connect. And that's the mirroring stage.
Okay.
of karma.
So I wonder if you can. There's a really great quote by Swedenborg here on the three vertical levels:
Okay.
natural, spiritual, and heavenly.
Okay. So from Emanuel Swedenborg from Divine Love and Wisdom number 237, these three vertical levels are called natural, spiritual, and heavenly. They grow along a continuum, gaining information and getting discernment thereby, ultimately reaching that highest level of discernment called a rational faculty. This in itself, however, does not serve to open the second level, which is called spiritual. This is opened by a love of useful activities, which stems from elements of discernment. Again, though, these in themselves do not serve to open the third level, which is called heavenly. This is opened rather by means of a heavenly love of useful activity, and this love is a love for the Lord. So what is that? What was some words in that previous quote about karma that I can try to look up and see if I can get it to come up on my screen and I can read it?
Oh, you mean the karmic relationship versus the eternal relationship?
Yeah, maybe
Or
just
well, we
relationship.
kind of. I think we pretty much.
Here it is.
Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, we can just so you can use it that if you need to.
Yeah.
See.
Make its way.
Because of their purpose, most karmic relationships are momentary, arriving very powerfully at an important juncture in our lives and just as quickly disappearing. Eternal relationships are usually of a more lasting quality. The nature of karma is to try to force things to become what you think they should be, whereas the nature of the eternal is to allow things to unfold into what they are becoming. Because of these differences, karmic relationships tend to be quite chaotic, with many highs and lows, whereas eternal relationships have reached fruition, become peaceful and serene, staying more along the middle ground. Karma is selfish and seeks for its own gratification, while that which is eternal is selfless. and seeks for God's gratification. Karmic relationships diminish the individuals involved in them, whereas eternal relationships are ordained by the Lord for the very reason that they energize the potentials within them, making the two greater together than they are apart. Karma is chaos, while that which is eternal is peace. And ironically, the insatiable emptiness that drives us in search of other people and things is truly sparked by the soul's thirst for union with God.
That's a good one.